Although at first Battle Creek may just seem like a peaceful brook babbling through a small ravine, perhaps something more serious lays beneath the surface. The presence of two structures, identical in layout, foreign in nature, and adorned with opposing red and blue sigils, suggests this area was once more than just a peaceful homestead. This mystery is furthered by the rather haunting cold colour tone and fog present in the lower levels of each structure, and by the fact that there appears to be no foreseeable escape from the gorge. It's clear this place was once a staging ground of some sort, but for who? And for what purpose? You ever wonder why we're here? The canyon of Blood Gulch is so vast, arid and endless, it often makes its inhabitants think similar things. Now, whether that was intentional, part of its original design to make those battling here think of nothing but the battle, or whether it's just a byproduct of the hot, dry air that constantly circulates this dry valley, we can't be sure. What we can be sure of, though, is that this training ground was once home to many legendary battles, fought between ancient entities, some now lost in the mist of time, and some who linger to tell their tales. A winding alpine canyon, dangerous heights. More beneath the surface, Danger Canyon is everything settlers on this mysterious ring have come to expect. Or is it? Beyond the vast, sweeping valley, laid out in an almost intentional manner from one structure to another, lies a series of dark and claustrophobic tunnels into the mountain. When these winding paths reach their epicenter, a majestic room, since overtaken by the Halo's newest arrivals, is presented. However, at the helm of this room is what appears to be some sort of ancient control panel made up of undecipherable glyphs, symbols and shapes, and looming down over it, a mural of some sort. Whatever this means and whatever its function, it's a clear indication that whatever or whoever built it is far beyond our human comprehension. Maybe the dangerous heights and hazardous bridges are there for our benefit, should they return. Located in the middle of an infinite ocean, Death Island is an aptly named island architecturally inspired by Alpha Halo's silent cartographer. But as with many ancient Forerunner structures, far more lies beneath the surface of this landmass than what is visible at first glance. The rather typical beaches feeding into cave systems that lead to clearings and small valleys are only the tips of this iceberg. There are also some less natural formations that tell a different tale. What has more than likely been a desert island to many a meddler marooned on this Halo was once a training ground for its creators, possibly even one of ceremonial or religious significance if the murals on the walls are to be considered. Beyond that, the clear wall markings, teleporters and colour coding suggest once again that the architects of these mysterious, forgotten structures were no strangers to war. Among the few locations we've visited so far, Icefields is an outlier. Steeped in an icy tundra, this ancient training ground epitomizes the Forerunners' architectural methodology. To not build over an existing environment, to not erase it, but rather to instead build into it, using its natural quirks and details to their advantage, all while creating mesmerizingly beautiful arenas. However, given the environmental changes a Halo undergoes during times of extreme biohazard, what this ancient civilization were training to fight in these fields of ice bears no thinking about. Infinity is a location that truly lives up to its name. A howling, arid canyon, vast in almost every way and designed to almost confuse its inhabitants. Designed in such a way that every path leads to the same destination, it could be speculated that this canyon was designed intentionally to hone one's ability to resist the monotony of repetition and to help them avoid insanity. The roaring Arctic winds of Sidewinder would have you convinced that this canyon is deserted, and although it may be now, the structures in the mountainside indicate that it wasn't always this way. Whatever these tunnels and passageways were once used for may be beyond our comprehension, but the true scale and isolation of this icy tundra are instilled into the hearts of any who come across it. Situated in the heart of one of Alpha Halo's many dense woodlands, Timberland, a hilly clearing among the dense surrounding forest, paints a far less serene picture. Among the babbling brooks, waterfalls and rocky outcrops lies the many memories of ancient battles once fought here, but there is no doubt that there are still many more yet to be fought. Derelict, a long-forgotten space station of the ancients who built the Halo. Categorized as Deep Space Anomaly number 0198 by the UNSC, this long-abandoned vessel watches quietly over the planet of Threshold. Its original purpose? Far beyond our comprehension, although if the symbols engraved into the alien metal walls partially lit by aging lights are anything to go by, it may have been something of a worship station, holy in its nature. Or, alternatively, an observation platform left suspended in deep space, allowing these ancients to keep a watchful eye over their domain. If you didn't have Japhyrophobia before, you do now. Very few ancient relics inspire a feeling of just vast insignificance, like this bridge facility. Suspended above an abyss of ghost-like mist, the eternal dark that surrounds this megastructure makes it feel even more imposing than it already is. The sheer scale of the valley, the bridge, and the cliffside catwalks makes you wonder, what did this ancient civilization mean to accomplish here? Were they simply testing out new methods of gorge traversion? Or something more sinister? A vast, deserted hangar-like room in a mysterious, void-like location on Alpha Halo. Scattered across the ground are tombstones. Whether they represent what our tombstones represent or something entirely different is unknown. But if the eerie ambience of Hangham High, complete with the almost alien roar-like sound, is any indication, whatever once inhabited this strange place is long dead. Claustrophobia and tunnel vision complete with extreme mood lighting. The chilling blue and aggressive crimson lighting of Longest exacerbate the structure's more unsettling atmosphere. The walls, adorned with engravings, give off a sense of ceremony and significance, and the low murmur of ancient machinery in the background is ever present, reminding its inhabitants that more lies beneath the surface. Training, parasites, maintenance, the intended purpose of this alien structure is unknown. The effect it has on one's psyche, however, those red lights are enough to make even the strongest cyborg uneasy. As the name would suggest, the prisoner facility was once used to store those who violated ancient laws. Few windows, difficult to traverse, viewing windows that look down upon the lowest level. This structure, as alien as it may be, feels oddly reminiscent. However, if the low white noise of this penal facility is anything to go by, those who were stored here did not retain their sanity for long. The reason for their now absence can only be left to the imagination. Dude, you really need to. This facility, colloquially named the Chill Out, is the first Covenant facility that we're visiting today. Although, given the Covenant's heavy use of Forerunner tech, it could be considered a Covenant Forerunner hybrid. The foot-level mist that covers the lower levels of this facility adds to its air of mystery. It's very alien in its design, and gives little away as to its intended purpose, but if the low, constant hum of energy is anything to go by, it could be some sort of power plant. One that's seen better days. Situated in the middle of a vast infinite ocean, miles out from the land of an unknown planet, Damnation is an ode to the technological genius of the Covenant. As one of their many hydro-processing stations scattered across the stars, it's here where repurposed foreigner machinery is used to generate hydropower for their ships of all sizes to fuel their path to total galactic domination. In the heart of deep space, two UNSC Halcyon-class warships stand parallel, their bulkheads removed to expose platforms, teleporters, and barrels. Whether this is just a training simulation or the top brass have expanded their budget and actually modified two entire ships for training in such a hazardous environment is unknown. But simulation or not, the constant howl of deep space is enough to haunt any leatherneck. The warning tape, however, provides sufficient safety for all who train here, even those who wish to practice boarding action. The United Nations Space Command seeks to not only train their Spartan clones to be strong physically on the battlefield, but mentally as well. And such was the genesis of the Chiron training facility on Mars. 9 rooms, each more claustrophobic than the last, connected only via a closed loop of teleporters, designed to confuse, bewilder, and fatigue those who train here. But those who make it out venture onto the battlefield with a mental fortitude like no other, and an undying wish to never return to Mars. Although initially appearing as a confusing maze of ancient tunnels, gradually ascending or descending, with teleporters scattered around and the odd, perplexing monolith, these tunnels have undergone some unintended modifications at the hand of the Halo's newest inhabitants. During the battle on this ring world, a mysterious and seemingly forgotten group from the Pillar of Autumn begun digging, mining into the surface of the ring and stumbling across this strange web of interconnected tunnels buried beneath the surface. Be it part of the Halo's self-sufficiency systems, a string of maintenance tunnels, or an ancient buried place of worship for those who constructed it, one thing is for certain: you do not want to be stuck in this rat race. And finally, for today's rather enigmatic lore video, we have a long-deserted UNSC training facility. What's commonly referred to as Wizard by the crew of the Autumn, an inside joke I'm sure, is a combat training arena that once resided on the Pillar of Autumn. Now, stranded on the Halo and laying in her grave, the Wizard Arena remains derelict, its warning light still activated, but its days of training well in the past. Those who once honed their skills here, likely lost or dead. With the looming mass of Threshold and the Arc of the Halo now its only observers, it's safe to say this facility's training days are over. Ivory Tower was once the lavish home of one of New Mombassa's wealthiest socialites, a man by the name of Lance O'Donnell, rumoured by some within the city's great archives to be a distant relative of the once great jingle writer, Marty O'Donnell, but the jury's still out on that one. However, following Lance's unfortunate passing, the tower was converted into a public park, intended for use only by the upper echelon of New Mombasa society, giving the elite of this thriving city a calm and tranquil place to go and chill, a place conducive to solitary contemplation and repose. For some peculiar reason, however, this elite park was later fancied by wargames analysts for its unique verticality and vague symmetry, of which they believed to be the perfect VR training scenario for mid to close quarters combat. On the beaches of Zanzibar Island stands many highly efficient wind power stations, the focus of today's investigation being station number 7. In the 2400s, when the East African Protectorate launched their alternative energy campaign, which was part of their renationalisation initiative, Zanzibar Island was selected as one of the many that would house these large facilities. However, it seems that these stations weren't quite as efficient as the Protectorate had hoped. In the early 26th century, the station was recommissioned and repurposed, now for some reason a hotbed for classified military training exercises. But yet, among the now deserted Camp Frohman, the blue screen of death riddled facility, and the calming beach, the Great Wheel of Zanzibar Station 7 continues to turn, outliving all those who built it and providing ample training for those who now seek to defend it. Section 14, referred to as Headlong within the Wargames VR simulations, is a section of docks on the mainland portion of New Mombasa. In the daytime, the industrial harbour monitors traffic coming to and from Nyali, Tudor and also New Mombasa Island, which is located right off the mainland. But when night falls, this shoreline industrial park becomes one of the most notorious hangouts for the city's dark underworld. Why the criminals favour this dock over the others is unknown. Maybe it's the shadowy corners or the overall lack of surveillance, but I'm sure the NMPD will crack down on them sooner rather than later. But for now, when the sun sets, this dock remains less than clean. Foundation is located deep within Chicago's Industrial Zone 8, which is now a deserted tactical autonomous robotic defense system testing facility. Referred to as the Thunderdome by some of the older generation who once worked here, Foundation was created by Acheron Security to build and test autonomous combat drones. However, with the rumoured, and I emphasise rumoured, rise in augmented humans within certain secret branches of the military, Acheron decided to mysteriously abandon the facility, and also the project, leaving the Foundation facility desolate and left to fend for itself against the elements. In the ancient, dusty streets of Old Mombasa lies turf. Slum-like streets, alleyways and houses, now home to a UNSC field hospital, and the carcass of a scarab. Taken down by a group of tenacious marines and then finished off by an orbital max strike, courtesy of the UNSC Brasidas, the scarab came crashing down through the suburb, laying waste to all in its path. But turf's bloody history doesn't end there. As human forces try and secure their prize, the Covenant use the dark, shadowy corners and abandoned homes to their advantage. With potential assassins lurking around every corner, what was once a centre of commerce and community, these dusty storefronts and maze-like buildings now make for a sniper's heaven. It's clear that Old Mombasa will never return to its former glory. Its previous inhabitants saw tradition in these old, dusty buildings, but with the arrival of the Covenant, these traditions are the last of their concerns, as the carcass of the scarab breaking down their front door more than reminded them. The residents of this district area also suffer the same fate. District, another name for the Liberty Street neighbourhood, which is located in Sector 05 of Old Mombasa, besides the shores of Kilindini Harbour, is yet another war-torn region of this old city, except this time, a more familiar one. Beyond the building that Chief, Johnson and the marooned Marines took refuge in as they began their trek through Old Mombasa, across the Great Bridge and into New Mombasa, is a small winding road, surrounded by tall buildings, balconies and rooftops. Yet again, a sniper's heaven. An old stone parking lot remains almost entirely intact, as do the countless billboard advertisements, beckoning their readers to come visit the cool, calming beaches of Zanzibar, or alternatively, purchase the ever-iconic hog. You know, District is proof that the products and services that we create will long outlive our mortal bodies, somehow able to even withstand an alien invasion. Just some food for thought there. In the dangerous orbit of Earth floats the UNSC Onan, a freighter ship within the UNSC, the crew of which, on occasion, have been known to bribe agents at the Earth spaceports to bypass what they claim are the longest inspections in the galaxy. The jury is still out on that one. On board the Onan is Elongation, a section of the freighter that's dedicated to the processing of cargo crates. Now, thankfully, the Covenant happened to arrive at Earth on the opposite side of the planet, so the ever-moving conveyor belts of the Onan were left relatively undisturbed to aid in the sorting and shuttling of materials and supplies to both military and civilian recipients across the globe as they dealt with the invasion. No matter the state of the planet down below, Space FedEx are proud to continue to operate. I mean, how else would your Amazon Prime order of 5,000 biofilm canisters be delivered? The completely out-of-control maglev train of Terminal is proof that humanity should never put too much faith in automation. That said, however, this rather idyllic train station gives us a glimpse into a pre-war-torn New Mombasa and the services that it once provided. Before the Covenant arrived and tore through the city, citizens would regularly eat lunch, go for some retail therapy, and socialise among the towering skyscrapers of this station. Despite Lewitoni Maglev Station, as it was once called, being relatively untouched by the Covenant, the command console of its maglev train is not. Suffering damage of some sort, it now hurtles erratically through the transit system, causing all civilians to flee, and possibly even the Covenant to flee as well. The UNSC propaganda and hog advertisements scattered throughout the station no longer fall on tempted eyes, and the announcers over the intercom are informing nobody. This desolate, out-of-control station now only exists as a hazard to all who encounter it, and the distant, lingering storm seeks to make matters even worse. The Tombstone facility was once a proud UNSC munitions testing complex, but like many of today's arenas, it now lies dormant, surrounded by the carcass of New Mombasa and basking in the ominous orange glow of its sunset. However, much to your surprise, the arrival of the Covenant was actually not what put an end to this facility's working days. Several safety concerns came to light, and its operators were forced to decommission it, leaving this extremely industrial weapons lab and also some of its most powerful prototypes to gather dust for an unknown amount of time, only adding to the aesthetic its creators were undoubtedly going for when designing it. An aesthetic that is only enhanced by the amber skyline and the remnants of New Mombasa that surround it. Now, let's move a little bit out of our comfort zones and take a look at the architecture of our species' greatest enemies, starting off with midship. Don't let the alien, yet still familiar luxury of midship fool you. The Pious Inquisitor, the Covenant battlecruiser on which this map is situated, is actually one of the fastest ships in the entire Covenant fleet, and one with an interesting history. It came to Earth under brute control as part of Regret's fleet, the Fleet of Sacred Consecration. However, when the Great Schism began, elites under the command of Artas Vadum seized control of the ship, returning it to High Charity to aid the elites in their civil war against the Covenant. When the Flood arrived, it formed part of the blockade that was built to prevent the parasite from gaining access to the Holy City, before eventually being summoned to Earth to glass Voy and stop the parasite from spreading there. It then went on to survive the Battle of the Ark, return to Sanghelios, and take part in the elite civil war that was going down on their home planet, referred to as the Blooding Years. From there, it exchanged hands quite frequently, from elite separatists to jackal pirates to insurrectionists, and all the while, Kilo 5 and Oni Black Ops team were working to retrieve it. Eventually, however, this once luxurious ship would fall victim to a jackal pirate skirmish, and despite one engineer's attempts to deny them access to the ship's internals, they detonated its plasma torpedoes, causing this ship to self-destruct. And thus, the luxurious, iconic comfort of midship was no more. The grandeur of High Charity is a vista for the pious who contemplate within Gemini, a palatial place of meditation for only the most devout within the Covenant. Set in the garden of reverent contemplation, Gemini is a temple of thought and worship, dedicated to the Prophet of Truth, as indicated by the noble stone statue, and is easily one of the most religious holy grounds we'll cover today. This temple acts as not only a place for other prophets to quietly honour truth, but also as a refuge for senior prelates, of whom could retreat to this garden, seeking its solace while contemplating the mystery of the foreigners. In the centre of the temple is a holy tree, taken from a foreigner installation and standing as a symbol to signify life and to remind all those who worship here of their roots. And visible from the outer balcony is the key ship, the Anodyne Spirit, key to completing the great journey and to seeking salvation. However, when the parasite breached the city walls, the garden was consumed like any other location, from the lower districts to the mausoleum of the Arbiter, proving to those who still believed that this parasite sought nothing but consumption and destruction, as it had once done for their gods. And on the topic of their gods, and the parasite they once warred with, it's time to move on to the most foreign and thought-provoking of today's installations, those with intended purposes far beyond our realms of imagination, and of which were constructed by the ancients with mysterious intentions hundreds of millennia ago, the Foreigner maps, beginning today with my favourite Halo map of all time for a multitude of reasons, Lockout. Constructed high above an icy abyss on the side of a never-ending cliff face on Delta Halo, some believe the Lockout facility was once used to study the Flood. The passage of time and neglect of this installation by its monitor have allowed the snow and ice to engulf it. However, that may just be more evidence to suggest that this place was indeed once a Flood laboratory. Not only are there ominous-looking tanks, filled with a familiar green substance, and what is also assumed to be a library for study of the parasite, but the weather mechanisms on Foreigner installations have been known in the past to generate cold, harsh environments, such as this, surrounding areas the Flood are known to be located, presumably because the cold slows their spread. Although all-only research remains inconclusive, the evidence certainly points towards this desolate, remote facility once housing research into unspeakable horrors. The Ascension Station was one of many relay stations on Delta Halo that kept the ring functioning smoothly for untold centuries, independent of its neglectful monitor. This station in particular was discovered by the UNSC Coral Sea, a corvette that followed Regret through the Mombasa portal to Delta Halo. However, to avoid discovery by the Covenant fleet, the Coral remained low to the surface of the ring, devoting most of its time on the Halo to scanning its surface, and in doing so, discovered the Ascension facility, among many other relays, suspended high above the ground on almost intentionally tall rock formations. Similar to the Ascension facility, the Beaver Creek Canyon was also scanned by the Coral Sea, along with many other canyons like it. All of these canyons, Beaver Creek included, are used to bury the vast power generators, which are used by Delta Halo to power the dense web of telemetry conduits that allow its translocation grid, which is basically poetic license for teleportation, to function. However, further inspection by ONI scientists posit that these structures, long forgotten by their makers, were once the site of many bitter battles, but have been reclaimed by nature in the years passing. Following the Master Chief's destruction of Alpha Halo, debris was cast in all directions across space. Basis, one of the moons of Threshold, which was the planet Alpha Halo orbited, would ultimately be a recipient of some of the ring's debris. An area of the Halo where a lot of it landed was, in fact, where a heretic scouting party who had departed the gas mine had set up a makeshift camp while they explored the moon, and this is where Burial Mounds is located. In a desolate, arid section of a desert-like biome on the moon, chunks of Alpha Halo rained down to create makeshift structures, and woven into the not-so-natural caves and tunnels are the remnants of ancient Foreigner architecture, the meaning and purpose of which is unknown. As for the heretics who set up shop here, where they went and what happened to them is unknown, but if the name of this desert crater is anything to go by, the answer to that question is surely not a good one. Colossus returns us to a similar gas mine the Heretics once controlled. As one of the many in Threshold's orbit, the Colossus facility seems more large-scale than the one raided by the Arbiter, meant possibly more for processing this mysterious gas. The UNSC Red Horse and Oni Prowler conducted scans of the facility which were later corroborated by human elite dialogues, and yet still, scientists are absolutely clueless as to what the Forerunners' intentions were with all this damn gas. No matter its use case, however, given the grandiose and highly practical structure of this automated mining facility, it's clear that this gas was once and still is of some importance to the remnants of this ancient civilization. Steeped in the shadow of its bloody brother, Coagulation, a valley very similar to an all too familiar gulch found on Alpha Halo, was another installation discovered by the UNSC Coral Sea on Delta Halo. Investigating their scans, Oni researchers theorized that the Coagulation Valley, as it was referred to, was once a training site for young Forerunner warrior servants, seeking to prove their prowess in combat arenas before eventually going off to fight the ancient humans or the Flood on the front lines. The large array of combat scenarios, from vehicular to long range and medium range to close quarters combat, made this valley the ideal place for it. But that's just a theory. An Oni theory. Situated within a dark, dank cavern is the Waterworks facility, an ancient, yet genius Forerunner facility that not only marks their incredible ability to mimic natural beauty, but exemplifies their true intellect. The structure in the centre, containing a large piston, acts as a hazard to all who encounter it, but its true purpose is unknown. Another hazard is the large stalactites, which can be detached from the ceiling with small arms fire. It's clear all Forerunner health and safety workers were the first to be sent to the front lines to fight the parasite. Whichever ancient rate constructed this facility did so with precision and with a keen aesthetic eye as well. Ground level lights, the cracks in the cave with sunlight breaking through, and the use of the cave's natural formation in their structures proved that beyond their immense technological and combat proficiency, the Forerunners were masterful architects. Arguably the most terrifying map within Halo 2, rivaling that of even Lockout, is Containment. This arena may, at first, look relatively normal, but when you consider how the Halo's weather systems have changed in its vicinity, combined with the massive, dense, brutalist-style copper walls, the explosives scattered across the no man's land, and of course the name, it's clear battles with terrifying consequences were once fought here. All structures are designed in an incredibly pragmatic manner, contrasting those massively of other Forerunner installations, suggesting that those who built this place had little time to do so attractively. A truly horrifying implication given the Forerunners' usual focus on the beauty of their creations. The site itself acted as part fortress and part laboratory within the Flood quarantine zone on Delta Halo, a prison within a prison, acting almost as a field research lab for Forerunner scientists. This frozen tundra now lies lifeless and barren, but only for now. The ancient Forerunner security barriers within the structures, created to protect key scientists doing field research on the parasite, create a biological airlock, separating this dead, forgotten land from the rest of the ring and the rest of the quarantine zone. The large mechanical gates somehow still function, a relic of those who were bravely stationed here to watch over the Flood infection, to either research it or to defend those who were, but ultimately to help prevent total galactic consumption. Believed by some to have once been a prison or a dungeon, an abundance of evidence suggests that the ruins of Warlock were in fact a temple of some sort, with each quadrant dedicated to one of the elements: fire, earth, water, and sunlight. These ancient stone ruins now lay forlorn and forgotten, their true purpose lost to the ages, yet still they may hold one of the many keys to unlocking the mystery of the Forerunners. Now, it appears oddly that some of the stone structures were not actually built here, and were in fact transported from another location entirely. Now, why ancient foreigners decided to do this, and what they sought to gain from constructing this monolith, we'll more than likely never know. At some point in its lifespan, both human and Covenant troops have passed through this jungle shrine, leaving their footprints on this once sacred ground. Sacred ground that brings with it a sense of foreboding, exacerbated only by the dark, dank atmosphere, the rain and distant roar of the wind, and the rattling of unidentified alien mechanisms and creatures. This arena really epitomizes the fear of the unknown. Much like the Warlock site, the original purpose of what has been colloquially dubbed the Sanctuary has been lost to the march of eons. However, the majestic structures still stand as defiant as ever, as a cemetery to countless brave warriors who, more than likely, lost their lives fighting the parasite. Sanctuary was one of many stone foreigner ruins discovered by the UNSC Coral Sea, and upon further research, some have actually speculated that all these ruins may not even be foreigner, instead were built by those who were temporarily based on the ring, humans. However, regardless of their origin, the layout of these structures suggests that this sanctuary site was more cultural as opposed to practical, possibly built as a memorial or even a cenotaph. The waterfalls and aqueducts basking in the glow of the alien star above and draped in trees, bushes, leaves and vines makes for quite a quaint and serene arena, all of which ultimately converge in the middle at the centre of what looks to be a temple meant for meditation and contemplation, possibly to remember those who this arena was dedicated to, or for these ancients to pray to their distant gods for sanctuary during what were undoubtedly horrific times. Speaking of horrific times, Backwash is the amalgamation of everything the foreigners did to prevent the galaxy from succumbing to the horrors of the parasite. This facility proves that every rate, from warrior servants to life workers and even builders, played a crucial role in saving the galaxy from an awful fate. The facility itself is the surface level of a subterranean flood containment facility in the heart of one of Delta Halo's many swamps. Now, some, likely within Oni, have speculated that the foreigners built these containment facilities in swamps and bogs to try and deter would-be intruders, and to also mask the nightmares that lurk below. However, an all-too-familiar, dense, sickly fog now shrouds the surface, which can only mean one thing. The area is compromised and an outbreak has occurred. Thanks to the negligent 2401 Penitent Tangent, the monitor of Delta Halo, who can be seen flying around the facility, rampant and without a care in the world, the Flood have breached their containment, consumed local fauna and wildlife, and eventually led to the formation of the Gravemind. In fact, there are even strong indications that beneath the shroud of mist that now drowns this swamp lies a powerful intelligence, one with eons of knowledge, and who shares the same life essence as the only thing the ancients ever truly feared. Whoever is responsible for this lapse in containment protocols should be decommissioned immediately. The relic in the centre of this battle-scarred island is, according to Covenant scripture, dedicated to the foreigners who fell in battle against the Flood. However, scans gathered and investigated by the UNSC suggest that that may not be the truth. Recon 127, which was a surveillance team attached to the Inamberclad, were deployed to investigate the large structure buried beneath the island shortly after the Allies arrived at Delta Halo. Upon arrival, however, heavy Covenant resistance on the island shot down their Albatross, and sadly, none of the crew survived. They did, however, transmit a number of compelling scans of the island back to the Amberclad, which confirmed what some suspected. The relic protruding out of the ground was in fact the remains of a long-dormant foreigner vessel that was carefully hidden beneath the island over 100 millennia ago. These scans directly contradict what was said in the Covenant scriptures, but that isn't to say that this island and the ship buried beneath it have no links to the parasite. Perhaps the reason it was buried in the middle of what seems to be an infinite ocean is because there was something on board that the foreigners wanted to ensure could never reach the surface. Steeped in one of Delta Halo's many dense jungles, Desolation was once a foreigner science outpost used to study the extensive collection of species gathered by the life workers during a conservation measure. However, following their activation of the Halo Array, this facility lies dormant, long forgotten and abandoned, and slowly engulfed by nature. But yet, the energy spires on either side of the construct are still active. Along with the still ever-clear glyphs and murals on the walls, this is just further proof that the Foreigners' constructs were built with the intention of outliving their creators. Uplift is one of the most practical maps today, and one with a crucial role to play in the long-term maintenance of Delta Halo. The hallmark of this arena, the Foreigner Spire, has unknowable energy seething from its long-abandoned orifice. Originally scanned by the Coral Sea, it appears the building at the end of the bridge acts as one of Delta Halo's critical power conduits, emitting an energy node designed to delicately control the direction and also movement of Delta Halo as it orbits substance, ensuring it remains anchored to the planet and doesn't lose its course. However, the humans who found this facility also encountered a Covenant infantry detachment, attempting to tap into the conduit, believing, like always, that it was of some great religious significance. When they find out its true purpose, I'm sure they'll be devastated. And now, finally, we have the Halo 2 Anniversary maps. Now, before we cover these, let me just make you aware that the lore for them is assumed to be the same as their predecessors. The same goes for the maps as well. Well, at least mostly. That said though, with their environment seeing some quite radical changes, there's much to speculate about, and so this section will be more speculation as opposed to just pure lore, but there's definitely some lore in there as well. Starting off, we have the Lockdown Facility, near identical in its design to the Lockout Facility, except for some natural hazards, and it may be one of many flood research platforms scattered across this icy cliff face, all of which may even share the same designs. The strange creatures, now visible, suspended in their green glowing tanks, give us a slight glimpse into what ancient scientists were researching on these platforms, and given the Foreigners' tendency to create multiple identical structures scattered across various installations, it wouldn't surprise me if Lockout and Lockdown were two of many like them. However, the name Lockdown implies that the entity who was trusted with maintaining this important facility didn't quite do its job. Now, contrary to what I just said, Remnant does actually shed some new light on the mysterious relic in the centre of this island. This island, quite possibly different to the original one in Relic, plays host to an enigmatic foreigner megalith, which later became the subject of comprehensive research by the Lisbon pioneer groups, who returned to investigate the ring towards the end of the war. Local inspections catalogued by the groups indicate that this megalith was constructed to pay tribute to foreigner warrior servants who were killed during the final siege of their colonies by ancient humanity. At the time, it appeared to the foreigners as if humanity were invading their space, seeking to conquer their lands, but in fact, they were fleeing from their own land as it was rapidly consumed by what they called the Shaping Sickness, the Flood. Shrine is theorized to hold the same purpose as Sanctuary, its predecessor. However, seeing as it bears some slight differences to it, I do wonder if, again, it's another structure entirely built, or I guess in the sense of Sanctuary, rebuilt and repurposed, in a similar manner to it, just in a different location. Located atop what appears to be some sort of mountain retreat and surrounded by similar looking rock faces, draping vines, and shrouded mist with ancient spires lining the horizon, Shrine still appears to be somewhat of a solitary retreat for those who once wished to honour their brave and fallen, or maybe honour their gods. Warlord is a dark and mysterious cenotaph, constructed to pay homage to those who fell during the Cradle conflict, a somber yet bloody Forerunner civil war that occurred long before their war with the humans, and which saw the loss of countless warriors. The architecture of Warlord is extremely ominous to me, draped in ancient cave paintings, likely glyphs to honour the fallen this site was dedicated to. Surrounding this graveyard-like monument and the dead tree that stares over it, an aggressive maelstrom forms, exacerbated by the large energy beam erupting from the spire, which may even be the cause of this storm, possibly to ward off intruders from this holy ground, and to ensure the land of the fallen is never desecrated. The overall green aesthetic, combined with the ancient stone structures and the beam of energy emitting from the centre, really remind me of Minas Morgul from Middle-earth. Whether Tolkien had somehow encountered this site when designing the fallen Minas Ithil, or whether it was merely a coincidence, is unknown. But despite this site's purpose as a graveyard, as a holy ground dedicated to brave warriors, these two locations emit equally disturbing and foreboding atmospheres. Much like the Ascension facility, Zenith is a relay station, suspended so high above Delta Halo's surface that both edges of the ring are visible. However, unlike any other relay station so far encountered, this site is actually suspended in the ring's atmosphere, and is kept in place using the Halo's gravitic control systems. To reach this relay, a slipspace translocation system, one designed exclusive to this facility, is required, allowing for seamless instant transition between the surface and the heights of Zenith. Skyward, the final Forerunner-class map for today, is simply the area in Delta Halo's atmosphere where the Zenith facility is typically located. However, where the Zenith relay has gone is unknown. If, God forbid, the parasite has caused the ring's gravitic generators to fail, then this outbreak may be entirely out of control. Bloodline, the first of Halo 2 Anniversary's 2 human maps, is a desert valley on an unknown installation, now littered with UNSC structures and bases. The Gulch itself was used for tactical operations, to train soldiers to withstand the bloody toll of protracted combat, but perhaps something a little darker lies beneath the surface. Each base is outfitted with an EMP tower, knocking out all electronics in the area surrounding it. Now, they could have just been part of the training exercises, but maybe not. When you consider how enclosed and hidden the valley is that this band of soldiers decided to set up shop, perhaps they were doing so to try and hide from someone or something, and perhaps these EMP spires were their final line of defense against whatever this being was. Stonetown is one of dozens of wind power stations constructed and later abandoned by the East African Protectorate in the 25th century. The Stonetown station, however, seems to have succumbed more to the sands of time than the Zanzibar station, with its great wheel quite literally falling apart. Awash, an area of an ocean amid scattered islands, was discovered by the Office of Naval Intelligence. During their investigation into this sector of Delta Halo, their research patrols uncovered a great deal of insight into the Forerunners' defense strategy. Perhaps more than just ruins lies beneath the surface of the ocean. And finally today, we have Nebula, an area of space in an unknown star system. Within this dark, lonely sector is a scattered asteroid belt, a strange orb of plasma or light or something, and what looks to be a dying star, providing an ominous yet at the same time morbidly beautiful orange glow. The remote contact team charged with the security of this site deemed it far too dangerous to remain, and thus it now lies abandoned, silent in the heart of deep space. Starting off today's deep dive is a map that in many ways really is close to home, High Ground. Situated at the helm of one of Voi's many delightful beaches is Outpost C9, a former NATO military base constructed sometime in the 20th century, intended to combat earlier and simpler enemies. However, following the New Mombasa slipspace event, this relic base of age-old conflicts was reactivated, creating a stark contrast between the modern technology scattered throughout its various rooms and bunkers and the crumbling stone of its structure. Its fortified tower, heavy gate, and mounted turret provide ample defense against alien invaders, and located at the back of the base is an advanced short-range ground-to-air missile 10X launcher, used to defend the base from any potential air assault. This now quaint and rather idyllic beachside fortress was once used by the UNSC as a testing site for retrieved brute spikers, recovered from fallen brutes during their invasion of New Mombasa. Now, whether anything of worth was extracted from these violent weapons is unknown. Last Resort is another one of the many wind power stations, like Zanzibar and Stone Town, situated within Sector K2433 on Zanzibar Island, south of the coast of Mombasa. Known as Zanzibar Municipal Turbine 7, it was originally constructed by Welterman, Carney, Cotton and Hayward Incorporated, and was built within some sort of old stone structure. Beyond the sea wall lies a great wheel, Camp Frohman, and the vast, now likely unstable generator room. Like all the other power stations, it was created as a part of the East African Protectorate's renationalisation efforts in the 24th century that ended up going nowhere. The Last Resort station was decommissioned in the 26th century and later taken over by the UNSC to be used as a combat training arena. The Pit, also known as UNSC Training Facility Bravo, is a training arena that goes against the grain. In an age where most combat training is almost entirely VR-based, the Pit offers soldiers a real, unfettered and natural arena to train in person. Something that fills old-school drill instructors with immeasurable pride and joy. As I'm sure you can imagine, they like to do things the old way. Located within a hangar on an airstrip at the base of Mount Kilimanjaro, this rather basic-looking arena has been enhanced to offer the most realistic training possible. Reactiveness is tested by the dynamic brute targets that emerge from the floor if they sense nearby motion, and perceptiveness and sanity are tested by the Jackal sniper targets, lurking in the high-up windows of the structures, moving from window to window, always keeping a watchful eye on their would-be victims. In the comm room, the overseers of combat training can monitor their cadets in battle, and judge their combat lethality, before being sent into the howling abyss, to never return. Foundry, also known as Traxxas Factory Complex 71, is one of the many warehouses within Traxxas Heavy's large global warehouse network on Earth, used to store goods and supplies of all different varieties, and is located deep within the Traxxas Factory Complex 09 in Voi. However, the UNSC sought out this barren facility as a live-fire training arena, and created detailed scans of it, including some of its long-dormant maintenance hallways and empty offices to be used in wargames training simulations. Set within the ancient 20th century war base known as Crow's Nest, Rat's Nest is the base's ammunition storage facility, but appears to also double up as some sort of port for the base as well. Located on the outer edges of the cliffside that the nest is built into, Rat's Nest not only allows for sweeping views of Voi's savannas, now littered with the debris of Mombasa's once great space elevator, but also easy pelican access, useful for resupplying both the nest and also those fighting on the front lines. This World War II base was once a safe haven for the Allies, but once the Prophet of Truth and his Covenant discovered it, this relic of wars long past was scuttled, its invaders blasted to oblivion. Standoff, a set of two bases innocently opposing one another atop a peninsula in Kupiga-Simu, Africa, was one of the UNSC's primary military sites that was responsible for deep space communications relay, as evidenced by the gargantuan satellite dish off in the distance, which tends to harbour a strange settler. The standoff facility and its satellite specialised in transmitting signals to and from locations across the Sol system. However, since the end of the war and the rapid advancements made in FTL communication, it has since been rendered obsolete, and now instead functions as a training ground for Spartan live-fire exercises. Located deep within the bitter Arctic Circle is UNSC weather station Z41, Blackout. Originally a privately owned research platform, the Blackout facility was once the site of many chilling conspiracy theories. Rumour had it alien life forms were stored on the remote station for safekeeping. Some even posited that the structure itself was based off a distant, dark and equally snowy facility. One that harboured horrors beyond imagination. But since the UNSC's acquisition of this chilling helipad facility, those rumours and theories have sadly proven false. Now, Blackout simply serves as a store for glacier core samples, a Doppler radar, and other various pieces of research gear. All basking in the haunting glow of an aurora borealis, localised entirely within this sector. Ghost Town, built in the 24th century, was once a global water campaign water purification facility, and part of the Mount Kilimanjaro water plant. However, it has since fallen into ruin, and now stands as an eerily dormant relic of times past. This facility that once stood proud, pumping and filtering clean water throughout all of Africa, now lies a structural graveyard, reclaimed by nature and lost to the eons. Nonetheless, when it was decommissioned in the 26th century, it was snapped up by the UNSC, and saw new life as an arena for highly classified military training exercises, notably wargame simulations and ingress-egress operations. The Quito Space Tether, referred to by most as Orbital, was constructed by the International Society of Civil Engineers on January 14, 2313. It was one of the 6 space elevators built on Earth, and was tethered to the San Francisco to Quito elevator in South America. But this station was truly special. Some 60-ish years following their passing, the orbital station was dedicated to both Tobias Fleming Shaw and Wallace Fujikawa, the creators of the Shaw-Fujikawa Translight engine, aka the slipspace FTL drives that power almost every single UNSC ship. In addition to its gorgeous views of Earth, its unique space station aesthetic, and its daunting endless chasms, a plaque dedicated to the 2 scientists who advanced our species more than anyone or anything else and enabled our travel across the stars, dons the walls of this comfy station. Let all who pass through this tether remember those that made interstellar travel a reality. And for today's final human-based map, we have one that returns us to our species' basics. Longshore, a fish processing plant on the shores of Old Mombasa. Although UNSC carriers can be seen on the water, off in the distance, don't mistake this map for some sort of secret military facility. It really is just a simple processing plant where the daily catch is received at the port, taken through the processing plant before being packaged and put into transit, bound for destinations all across the continent and possibly even globe, and all under the ever-watchful eye of the charismatic, yet withering Franck, a boss with rather fishy intentions. Okay, so now it's time to move on to the architecture of our invaders, the Covenant, starting off with the remote and desolate Snowbound. Why the Covenant chose to make camp in the heart of this icy tundra is entirely lost on us. Perhaps it's something to do with the origins of this planet, situated not too far from human-occupied space. Beneath the blindingly white surface lies a bottomless chasm of foreign artifacts, their purpose unknown, at least to us, so perhaps that has something to do with it. Given the abundance of cables and power generators, perhaps this is some sort of Covenant energy plant, although typically they do tend to rely on hydroprocessing to provide power, so maybe not. One thing is for certain though, Guarding this realm of majestic spires and mysterious caves is a series of autocannons, sitting silently, observing the mountain passes that lead to the base and the vast tundra on its doorstep. Who, or what, these powerful cannons are defending this base's inhabitants from, however, bears no thinking about. If ever there was a map to elicit the fear of the unknown, it's Snowbound. There was never a more pragmatically named map than Assembly. Set within a scarab manufacturing plant in the Assembly Forges, one of High Charity's primary manufacturing plants for Covenant weapons, gear, and vehicles, a large lake-like body of Lekgolo worms surrounds this plant. Yes, apparently that yellowy emulsion-looking liquid is, in fact, a mass of Lekgolo. How alien. Above the plant, the production line of the scarab can be seen, and oftentimes a half-built scarab will pass along the conveyor belt on its way to completion. The map itself is an island in the heart of the Worm Lake, harbouring machinery that decontaminates the shell of the scarab, making it a safe housing for the gigantic Lekgolo colonies that will eventually power and control these devastating quadrupeds. A large beam emerges from the centre of the map, powering a wall of decontaminating energy that the scarab passes through before moving on to the final stages of production. The vastness of the Assembly Forges demonstrates not only the sheer size of the Covenant war machine, but also the Forerunner roots of all their technology. Heretic, a map with incredibly iconic roots, is in fact the cruiser deck of the CCS battlecruiser, the Pious Inquisitor. As a part of the Fleet of Retribution, led by the elite who splintered off from the Covenant during the Great Schism, the rest of the fleet can be seen out the windows, shortly before the fall of their ex-holy city, High Charity. Where the Pious Inquisitor and her majestic fleet are headed at this time is unknown, towards some mysterious gas giant, it seems. Following the schism, this once brute-controlled ship was seized by the elites under orders of the Spec Ops commander, Artas Badum, of whom returned it to High Charity to be used in their war against their former masters. It then formed part of the blockade surrounding the city to prevent the parasite that had consumed it from escaping, before travelling to Earth to aid in parasite containment measures at the city of Voi that was rapidly under consumption. It then went on to survive the Battle of the Ark, return to Sanghelios, take part in the elite civil war there, the Blooding Years, and then begin frequently exchanging hands. At one point, it was under command of elite separatists. Then, Jackal pirates commandeered it, followed by insurrectionists, all the while an Oni Black Ops team, Kilo 5, was scheming to seize it for themselves. However, this beautiful, luxurious ship finally met an explosive end thanks to a Jackal pirate raid gone wrong. Perhaps this was for the best though. A group as dishonourable and dirty as Jackal pirates would have had no respect for such an elegant, majestic ship. Her beauty would have been entirely lost on them, a true disrespect to the talent and the honour of her shipwrights. Right, now it's time to venture far beyond the reaches of human space, to areas of the galaxy only ever graced by the ancients, the Forerunners. Starting off with Construct. Very little is known about the purpose of this metal structure. Besides the almost holy glow of the purple and gold gravity lifts, the ornate detailing on the walls, and the subtle pulsating lights, the intentions of this facility are kept close to its chest. We do know, however, that it's located on the Ark, likely even in the same spire as the Cartographer, given the identical looking waterfalls off in the distance. This vast body of water, along with other raw materials, are consumed in the creation of even the smallest orbital installations. No structure, installation, or facility encapsulates the raw beauty of the Forerunners and their architectural design like Epitaph. Sitting at the apex of a monumental spire, in the heart of a vast, infinite desert, sits this ancient monastery. Outside, the dry desert wind howls, an ominous lighting marking the horizon. Within the structure, the holy chants of those long past can be heard, echoing throughout and reverbing off the gigantic stained glass windows, ancient animated glyphs contained within. Embedded within the walls are more sets of glyphs, almost resembling databanks of an unknown order. their meaning lost to the sands of time. However, the true mystery of Epitaph lies in its purpose. Now, I must stress that what I'm about to say is somewhat of a conspiracy theory held by those lucky few who got the chance to conduct research on this spire. But rumour has it, the spire itself is something of a headstone placed atop the burial site of an ancient evil, a betrayer of those who created it. If so, it would explain the monastery at the pinnacle of the spire and the chanting that can be heard within. Perhaps these ancient monks are talking to their gods, begging for them to allow the treasonous construct to atone for its sins. Or perhaps their chanting is something of an apology for unleashing such an unspeakable horror on the galaxy that their gods created. However, the presence of the sacred guardian hologram, glowing in a holy golden light at the helm of the hall, overseeing all that occurs within, suggests that it may be the latter. What is buried beneath this endless desert must never be unearthed. And in the lower regions of this spire is Citadel. Outside the small port windows, the endless sands of the Ark can be seen, and within lies a beautifully ancient interior. Clearly resembling the lower atrium of the shield towers that protected the Ark's citadel and control room, you can't help but wonder if Citadel also has something to do with shielding, given the rumoured importance that this tower has. Perhaps the holy pulsating golden lights within the walls are more than just an aesthetic. Perhaps they play some sort of role in shielding the tower from any who seek to break in and free the horror buried beneath. But that's just a theory. Either way, the ornate religious detailing on all parts of the structure clearly support the idea that this spire is religious in nature. Just what nature that is, however, we cannot say for sure. The vast and brooding forests that surround Guardian manage to outlive their creators, but may still harbour some of their most destructive constructs. Deep within this dense, infinite forest, somewhere on the Ark, Guardian, an ancient foreigner platform of unknown purpose, sits elevated among the trees, slowly being retaken by nature. Originally intended to be a mission in the campaign, Guardian Forest, where the Master Chief would fly through the forest in a hornet and fight ancient Guardian sentinels, it's possible that this ancient arena was once something of a control platform for these Guardians themselves, but that's just a theory. Likely one of the many concocted over the years by the meddlers who stumbled upon this gloomy wood. Isolation, a micro-quarantine zone on the Ark, may look rather quaint at first, almost like a private foreigner garden. But what lies beneath the surface is the beginning of something truly evil. When you take the winding path into the Flood Hive, or fall through one of the many cracks in the ground, likely a byproduct of the Blightland's rapid expansion, you suddenly see why such great walls surround this sector. The air in the cave is laden with spores. Sacs grow on the walls and ceiling, ready to burst at any moment, and what was once a concoction of grass and stone is now nothing but sickly biomass. What caused this small outbreak is unknown, but given its rapid consumption of local fauna, and even the once distinct foreigner metal as well, it's a good job the Ark's monitor, Tragic Solitude, was able to enact containment protocols as rapidly as he did, or God knows the unspeakable horror that would have festered in this once idyllic grassland. Suspended in the heart of an icy canyon, flanked by mountaintops and waterfalls, is Narrows, two distinct foreigner lobbies connected by one of their iconic bridges, below which sits a gigantic mysterious ring, with static energy circulating around it. The overlaying structure is something of a maintenance platform. When the forge in the centre of the Ark harvests a planet's materials to create a ring or some other construct, extreme volumes of heat are produced, volumes that ordinarily would render the Ark entirely uninhabitable. But Narrows is the facility that ensures that doesn't happen. Presumably, this ring mechanism, combined with the sub-zero surrounding temperatures, aid in the cooling of that heat, ensuring that all life on the Ark isn't blasted by the extreme heat emanating from the installation's core. Few arenas give off an aura of mystery and long-lost significance like Sandtrap. Being slowly consumed by the sands of eons is an ancient stone foreigner temple, overwatched by two great monuments. Surrounding this temple, however, is something that creates an uneasy atmosphere. Beyond the dunes is a vast metal wall encircling the entire arena and dotted with gargantuan towers. Now, initially this might make you think that the foreigners were protecting this once holy relic from would-be invaders, but when you delve into the lower regions of the ruins and discover a dark, secluded room, at the centre of which, a crypt, you may start to rethink that. Perhaps these stoic defences were put in place not to keep intruders out, but to keep whoever, or whatever, was buried in this crypt, in. Regardless of what was once buried here, if anything was once buried here, at some point during the war on the Ark, brute raiders discovered and fortified this sand trap, laying mines in the dunes surrounding it to prevent any demons from getting the jump on them. However, these attempts were unsuccessful. When the UNSC Aegis fleet arrived above the structure, an albatross, along with Behemoth and Leviathan, the two elephants, was sent to the surface and managed to secure the site. Whether the researchers that undoubtedly dispatched with this team discovered anything worthy of note in the temple or transcribed into the metal trimmings, or if, like most foreigner sites, they were simply perplexed beyond their means, is unknown. Sandbox is another foreigner site slowly consumed by the sands of time. More than likely referred to as a sandbox thanks to the distinct lack of any notable structure or monument, this site bears many similarities to Sandtrap, but also differs in two rather mysterious ways. Firstly, in the centre of what dusty stone remains unconsumed by the desert is a small hole, a trapdoor almost, which leads to a vast yet desolate crypt. Not the first ancient desert structure to feature a crypt, may I add. Much like the surface, this crypt also remains desolate, lacking any kind of structure or decor beyond some rather modern-looking floodlights, which only further brings into question the original intentions of the ancients who built this place. What's more, on the ground level, beyond the sweeping dunes and before the golden sunset, lies yet another dark, ominous metal wall encircling the site, and once again, with large, brutalist towers, shrine defenders, as they're called, dotted throughout. These shrine defenders fire devastating particle beams, but not away from this site, rather towards it, once again cementing the notion that whatever was buried here millennia ago was done so with the intention of never leaving this desert. This only makes one wonder even more what ancient evil this shrine was constructed to house, and ultimately constructed to contain. Deep within this alpine gorge lies Valhalla, a valley flanked by two of the Forerunners' ever enigmatic beam towers, the function of which still remains mostly unknown. However, it's clear that they are of some sort of vital importance to the Ark, considering their purposeful placement in this gorge to shelter them from any space debris that may come crashing down to the surface. Some researchers posit that these towers act as some sort of communications relay, and use the natural harmonics of the gorge to amplify their signals into deep space, allowing them to send commands to even the most remote locations across the galaxy. But we know nothing for sure. Another mystery that plagues this valley is what happened to the crew of the V398, the Pelican that crashed into the cliffside. Their landing in this curious gorge was unplanned, evidently. But where they went? A mystery. Sitting on the edge of one of Installation 08's massive glacial shelves is Avalanche, one of the only facilities to be successfully constructed on the ring prior to its untimely end. Freezing winds scour this blasted terrain, one that is littered with ancient battle scars, suggesting its roots are one of combat and war. The facility itself, embedded mostly within the ice shelf, is a power station, pulling power out of the densely compacted ice before it cascades into the vast, bitter ocean below, to be used for all manner of routines and subroutines that would have kept this halo running. If not for the actions of the Reclaimer, this site would have been one of the installation's core facilities. And finally, we have a facility with an extremely puzzling history: cold storage. Situated deep within the bowels of Delta Halo, cold storage is one of the many flood containment facilities on the Ring that experienced some malfunctions. It was originally built by its makers so they could study the specifics of the flood's evolution, how their forms changed and contorted as they continued to consume, and also the extremophilic thresholds of those infected by the parasite. This was extremely vital research that the ancients relied upon for their continued survival as a species, and as such, the security for this facility was tight. A large and currently unidentified monitor is affixed to the ceiling in the main hall, keeping a watchful eye on all who dwell within this laboratory, and for easy traversal around it, there are teleporters, locked in a closed loop so nothing can escape to the surface. However, as rigorous as these containment protocols were, they ultimately failed. When the monitor of Delta Halo, 2401 Penitent Tangent, began to slack with its monitor duties, there was a significant containment breach. Something of unidentified origin managed to breach the teleporter loop, allowing the parasite to break containment and escape. Whether this was the genesis of the outbreak on Delta Halo that created a Gravemind is currently unknown, but many conspiracy theorists who have studied this chilling facility believe that to be the case. One thing is for certain, however: this is not a facility that you want to be trapped and forgotten in. Located in the heart of Tayari Plaza in Sector 5 of New Mombasa is Crater, an arena with a frightening level of verticality, and permanently overwatched by the proud lion of New Mombasa. Once the location of a desperate yet chivalrous mission for a certain dropshock trooper, the remnants of his objective still remain in the atrium. A deserted, damaged drop pod. Its user, long gone, but its impact on this once peaceful plaza still visible. The lower ground of this precinct was once a peaceful place, likely bustling with commuters and business people going about their daily lives and admiring the rare sight of greenery in this very monochromatic industrial metal jungle. Ferns and untamed vines hang from the steeping walls, and small patches of an African grass, split into quadrants, combine with the stone pillars to form some sort of 26th century natural art piece. Ascending the steps out of the pit takes you to the street, littered with the carcasses of burnt out and abandoned vehicles, the owners of which likely had to flee their cars, their buses and their trucks for their lives upon the invasion. The vast towers of New Mombasa surround Crater, swimming in the energy particles that coat the island city following the opening and subsequent closing of the portal, and casting shadows across its streets. Evil marksmen can be seen lining the rooftops with a keen eye, waiting for some poor, unknowing soul to step out into the open. At night, the neon road signs, advertisements, billboards, and ground-level lights illuminate this plunging arena in an almost comforting manner, making it clear that prior to the invasion, this plaza was one that never slept. However, as one ascends out of the crater, they become engulfed by a blood-red glow, transforming the atmosphere of comfort into one of intimidation and terror. Lost Platoon is located within the heart of the Uplift Nature Reserve, which was funded by New Mombasa Uplift, those responsible for the creation of the city's space elevator. As the largest wildlife reserve east of Nairobi and one of the most renowned nature reserves in the world, it was once the crown jewel of the city, but when the Covenant chose it as a prime landing position, it became the area with the highest concentration of Covenant forces in the entirety of New Mombasa. Prior to its departure, Regret's carrier, the Solemn Penance, deployed much of its invasion force there, and even after, it continued to be the hottest of Covenant hot zones. Various platoons of Marines were sent into the park to take it back, but were very quickly overwhelmed, and it wasn't until the arrival of Dropshock Trooper Dutch that the tide would turn. He helped the Marines push through the reserve until they reached the area of Lost Platoon, what was once a visitor center for all coming to witness planet Earth's greatest and most exotic wildlife, but now exists as a makeshift UNSC forward operating base. Ammo crates and weapon racks scatter the observation deck and fill the supply rooms, sandbags are stacked to form cover, and a warthog, armed with a heavy chain gun, is stationed in the entrance. Where children would once observe wildlife, snipers are now positioned. Where families would pick up brochures and leaflets, sandbag emplacements are built. Where exotic wildlife would once freely roam, alien invaders desecrate with their filthy footsteps, tearing through the park on their vicious choppers and bombarding it with mortar fire. And then, in the weeks following, the entire nature reserve was more than likely destroyed during the Covenant's glassing of the area to uncover the Ark portal. There is nothing as emblematic of the suffering humanity endured during Earth's invasion than the desecration and destruction of the Uplift Nature Reserve. Sector 10 of New Mombasa has seen better days. A thick cloud of acrid smoke blankets this rally point, parted only by the arrival of phantom dropships. However, luckily for those digging in here, this Kizingo Boulevard entrance to Oni's Alpha site creates the perfect choke point. With Covenant forces converging on the doorway, it's the job of a brave squad of ODSTs to prevent them from carrying out the will of their gods and gaining access to the Alpha site. Various walkways and bridges allow troopers to get the high ground on their foes, whose dropships can only land in 2 locations, making for the perfect kill box. However, lose control of these catwalks and they become an enemy sniper's heaven. Thankfully, there's enough room to fall back, and the further you do, the higher the ground gets, giving you a fantastic view of the enemy landing zones. At night, the neon road markings illuminate the ground, and the remnants of the New Mombasa skyline, backed by the dark, brooding sky, create an ominous reminder of the events occurring in the rest of the city. In an attempt to remain proud and defiant, however, the entrance to the Oni building remains lit up, creating a stark contrast between the deathly darkness that shrouds the city streets, broken only by the amber glow of streetlights, and the vigorous, bright white illumination of the government building. This is either a strong, resilient act of defiance, or a sobering indication of where the priorities of the UNSC and UEG lie. Beyond the now destroyed bridge above the artificial lake leading up to the Oni Alpha site is the security zone. This zone makes up the bulk of the artificial island constructed specifically for this Oni building, located in the centre of an artificial lake walled off by gargantuan concrete walls, and acts as the final line of defence against the Covenant invaders who seek to gain entry to this vital site. Bearing down upon this park-like entrance is the Oni building itself, a vast, dark, featureless, brutalist building with an aggressive shape and silhouette. An almost soulless and evil-looking structure, it towers over the park like a titan, creating a strong sense of insignificance to all shrouded within its shadow, both friend and foe. However, the Covenant's mission to breach this monolith of a structure is going to be an uphill battle. The security zone is, in fact, a rather steep hill, laden with turret emplacements facing down, barriers to protect it from mortar fire, and thick concrete blocks to funnel the enemy down specific paths. Knowing the secrets that would ultimately be stored in this great tower, its architects took notes from their medieval ancestors for its location and design, to ensure it was as impenetrable as even the most resilient of castles. Alpha Site is set within the imposing Oni Alpha Site Tower, the single most important location in the entire continent. The official story is that this tower is simply an Oni office block for their East African Protectorate branch, but the reality is far, far more significant. This tower is in fact home to data aggregators studying the vast foreigner structure that was discovered below the surface of Voi, and that office higher-ups believe to be what the Covenant is after. You can see now why the tower is built on an artificial island in the centre of a walled-off lake with only one access point. The firefight map itself is set within the building's central elevator shaft, where Dutch, Mickey, and the NMPD officers planted the charges to destroy the building and deny the Covenant access to its secrets. The 3 elevators both ascend to the rooftop of the tower and descend deep into the depths of New Mombasa, connecting to the Superintendent's data center below the lake. The only way the enemy can infiltrate this part of the shaft via dropship is by setting down on one of the flanking balconies. These balconies were once places of quiet and solace for those who worked in this tower, fit with benches, water features, a sweeping view of the lake backed by the vast wall that encloses the facility, and a memorial commemorating agents who gave the greatest sacrifice in the line of duty to protect Earth and her people from the very threat now setting down 50 feet away. A sobering reminder that regardless of what we've sacrificed so far, we're still fighting a losing battle. High above the clouds of New Mombasa is the aptly named Windward, set on the rooftop of the New Mombasa Police Department headquarters. Flanked by countless skyscrapers protruding through the murky clouds, owned by various corporations and organizations, many even taller than the NMPD tower, this rooftop was used for emergency evacuation during the invasion. NMPD Pelicans would land at one of the various landing pads scattered around the rooftop, but after a short while, the Covenant caught wind of this and sent Banshees up to patrol above the clouds. During the hysteria at the beginning of the Covenant's invasion of the city, corrupt ex-cop Marshall Glick went into the lobby of NMPD HQ with an assault rifle, murdering 2 cops and taking 2 hostages, Officer Mike Branley and the daughter of the creator of the Superintendent AI, Sadie Endesha. However, shortly after, the lobby was stormed by a SWAT team who killed Glick and saved the 2 hostages. Inside the top floor of the tower are various rooms, all seemingly dedicated to NMPD's Special Operations Branch. However, the entire interior is now ravaged by the alien invaders. Rooms empty, monitors left flickering, and documents left scattered. Previously important case files left on the floor for all to see. Outside, officers had attempted to set up makeshift defenses, including barrels, crates, and mounted missile pods to try and swat the Banshees out of the sky and defend evacuees. All comms within the tower are undergoing a blackout. Whether that was intentional to stop the Covenant from intercepting evacuation chatter, or a consequence of the invasion is unknown, but given the catastrophic ruins of the space tether on the horizon, I'm inclined to believe it's the latter. Located deep beneath the surface of New Mombasa in sub-level 10 of the Superintendent's AI Data Storage Center is Chasm 10, a dark, unsettling mess of catwalks, bridges, and platforms, all suspended high above a pool of some sort of coolant, an underground lake possibly, to ensure that the AI, with its quintillions of calculations per second, doesn't overheat. Within this sublevel is the Superintendent's main data core as well, which the entire facility was built around and also to accommodate. However, at some point, presumably during its construction, a small section of the foreigner portal structure was found, and Oni immediately moved in, constructing the Alpha Site above it to both mask its existence and also to allow them to covertly research this mysterious alien structure. The large majority of those involved with the AI's construction were not informed of the discovery, including Daniel Endesha, its creator, who found out just as the invasion began. Knowing that the Covenant were headed for this mysterious ancient structure, Oni set up makeshift defenses in the chasm facing their entry point, barricades, sandbags, crates and turrets, and disabled the elevators to make this chasm as difficult as possible for the enemy to traverse. At some point during the invasion, however, this chasm was transformed into a drone hive. How such a vast thing was created so quickly is totally unknown, but its size and the rate of its expansion is unsettling, to say the least. And at the end of today's road, we have Last Exit, what was once the glorious entrance to the Uplift Nature Reserve. Located directly off one of New Mombasa Coastal Highway's junctions, this grand, majestic entrance once welcomed its visitors like royalty returning to their palace. Grand palm trees, large solid gold statues of Africa's regal zebras flanking the entrance stairs, sweeping views of the almost neo-futurist New Mombasa downtown district, and majestic marble features lining the walls of the interior. This was evidently a place that residents of New Mombasa were proud of. However, given their occupation of the park, the Covenant soon began to overflow into the entrance as well. The now desolate parking lot is controlled by jackals. Grunts and brutes stomp up the stairs beneath the watchful eyes of the zebras, and ghosts patrol the entry road and gazebo. Where families once queued to purchase park entry tickets, friendly snipers now dig in to defend the entrance. Where they would walk to enter the park itself now contains weapon racks, stocked full of pistols, submachine guns, fragmentation grenades, and more. The rapid changes this entranceway has undergone are symbolic of how ruthless and cruel our invaders are, but also how defiant the forces of humanity stand to defend what is theirs. The Anchor 9 station was one of 18 service, repair, refueling, and refit stations in orbit of reach during the war. All size and manner of ships could dock here to be serviced, from sabres and pelicans to even frigates and cruisers. In the later years of the Human Covenant War, Anchor 9 was the site of production for many UNSC warships, a task that her and her crew were still undergoing when the Covenant arrived, as evidenced by the half-built frigates stored in the surrounding repair facilities. The inside of the station is exactly what you'd expect, a typical space warehouse littered with control panels, monitors, tools, and spare parts. Just like its cousins, Battle Creek and Beaver Creek, Battle Canyon is one of the many facilities that help build a Halo's translocation grid, which is used for easy teleportation across the ring. Just like the other two creeks, Battle Canyon is set in a small rocky canyon, with each Forerunner structure acting as a key component in ensuring the ring's teleportation grid is active at all times. However, unlike the other two, this canyon has one extra Forerunner service room that's hiding a dark secret. Boardwalk is a once serene civilian concourse, located high up in the now war-torn high-rises of New Alexandria. It once acted as a sky bridge, connecting two large structures together and providing access between the two over the large river below. Beside it is one of the Halo universe's many maglev trains, but given the state of New Alexandria at the time, I think it's safe to say that this train is out of commission. I'm sure the commuters will be over the moon. Boneyard is one of the UNSC's many industrial shipbreaking yards located on Reach. However, this one in particular is owned privately by Synovier Heavy Machinery, the developers of many of the UNSC's flagships, the Pillar of Autumn included. Seen by some as a mechanical graveyard, as the name implies, these facilities are where old decommissioned ships are brought to be broken down into parts and recycled, and in the surrounding vistas lay the carcasses of ships that met their fate here. The unfortunate victim currently undergoing this procedure is the UNSC Commonwealth, a frigate that once held Dr. Halsey, Master Chief, and many other Spartan IIs, but now bears nothing but dust and sand. Breakneck takes place in one of New Mombasa's many docks known as Section 21, shortly after the Covenant's invasion of the city. On the other side of the bay, the ever-iconic New Mombasa skyline can be seen, and beyond that, the Uplift Nature Reserve. The dock itself is undergoing some sort of construction, with the superintendent watching over with its all-seeing eye. In the regions of the dock that are yet to be affected by either construction or plasma, billboard advertisements for Elon Musk's newest Tesla can be seen, the glorious Golden Hog. 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 The glorious Golden During the War on Reach, the Breakpoint facility was one of ONI's most important and highly classified locations. Located on the other side of the secret Forerunner ship to Halsey's lab, the facility is situated deep within the Babkatha ice shelf, a fittingly secretive location. The environment of Breakpoint is very much a work in progress. Before the Covenant made those who worked here disappear, they were deep in study of this mysterious ship, which some claimed held the secret to humanity's survival as a species. Monitors are still turned on, control panels still active, and pipes still connected, probing the ship for all its mysteries. We'll more than likely never find out what was on that ship, but what little has been teased is going to fuel conspiracy theories for years to come. A fittingly named map, Condemned is set on Gamma Station, one of Reach's orbital communication platforms in its final hours before destruction. Many mistake the glowing orange orb out the window for a sun or a star, but what you're actually looking at is Reach in the final hours of the Covenant's glassing. As the station systems begin to fail and certain sections of the station become damaged beyond repair, those on board are forced to watch the final stragglers of humanity's defense be torn to pieces. All the while, Covenant cruisers finish their job, converting what was once humanity's fortress world into a molten, ashy rock. Countdown is set in one of ONI's many launch stations that don't exist, for a space program that also doesn't exist. Set in the Sabre launch station by Forecast Lake, it acted as far more than just a launch station. Here, Sabres were researched and housed, hence the large blast door and spacious atrium for takeoffs, and also large number of terminals and control panels scattered around the map. This facility would later be used in Operation Uppercut during Reach's fall, a highly contentious operation that was carried out by Noble Team that violated countless ONI NDAs and proved how desperate humanity had truly become. Forge World is one of the biggest, most vast, and yet still one of the most mysterious maps in Halo history. It's set on an unknown Halo ring, but if Fireteam Raven is to be taken as 100% canon in which Forge World features, then this Halo may very well be Alpha Halo. Scattered across this vast lake and cliffside are many locations of interest. There's a valley that resembles Alpha Halo's Blood Gulch and Delta Halo's Coagulation, an island with a land bridge connecting it to the mainland, a large pillar resembling Delta Halo's Ascension, a quarry above a large hangar, and last but most definitely not least, Noble Six's cave. I would get him to come out and prove that, he really did survive Reach, but, only regulations and all that. Several things are hidden in the backdrop too, a beam tower, the purpose of which we're still completely clueless, a distant shore on the horizon covered in more alpine trees, and a mountain with a very subtle resemblance to a skull. All in all, very mysterious. The High Noon facility is in fact a large observation platform for those who once worked here, maintaining the gargantuan portal outside, keeping them safe from the portal and also the raging storm. The area itself is actually a Forerunner generator complex which creates immense power to fuel the huge slipspace portal outside, connecting it to an unknown number of locations across the entire galaxy. Although abandoned some 100,000 years prior, even with the sands of time slowly consuming it, this facility and all those like it continue to function flawlessly, a true testament to the Forerunner's automation capabilities. Set high up in the ranges of the Highland Mountains on Reach, Highlands is actually one of the most important locations in UNSC history. The facility is a part of the UNSC's Military Wilderness Training Preserve, where the Spartan IIs often trained. Situated above the Bighorn River on the peak of one side of the Longhorn Valley, this facility is now long abandoned. The Spartan IIs that once trained here are now either dead or actively trying to prevent what's knocking on this facility's doorstep. As the first of actually two hydro plants, Penance is set in a Covenant Hydro Processing Center on Buwan, the primary moon of the Grunt homeworld Balaho. The power that's generated from the water flow in this plant was once used to power and also refuel Covenant capital ships. Following the Great Schism, it was abandoned by its workers, but nevertheless, the automated subsystems ensured that the gears would keep on spinning for years to come. And then there's Powerhouse, or as it's called by the locals, and I apologise for this pronunciation, Utkozet Hydroelectric Power Plant. This plant provides clean hydroelectric power to local villages and settlements. Constructed in 2507, the plant is the only source of power in the Vieri territory of Reach. Although eventually it and the entire region would be overrun by the Covenant, the locals had this facility to thank for almost half a century's worth of power. Power that helped them smuggle weapons and resist the UNSC to their heart's content. Taking architectural inspiration from a familiar high-rise tower in New Mombasa, Reflection is set on the top floor of Synovier Heavy Machinery's tower in New Alexandria. Opting for a far more flashy design, much of the interior decoration takes heavy inspiration from modern Chinese architecture, and before the Covenant's invasion of the city was likely a hub of business activity. After the invasion, however, it fell under new management. I hear the new owners are real buggers. Ridgeline, although mostly foreigner in nature, was once acting as a UNSC camp. Set on and during the war on Alpha Halo, a platoon of the UNSC's finest once set up camp here, overlooking a massive foreigner relay complex that was likely used in communications between Sentinels and facilities across the ring. These foreigner structures are shrouded in so much mystery, and much like the rest of their structures, we can only really theorize about their use case. What we can be sure of, however, is the fate of the Marines who stopped here. They assumed that this timberland would act as a safe camp, but the Covenant forces who wiped them out thought otherwise. Although rather peaceful at a first glance, the secrets of Solitary paint a truly terrifying picture. This vast, eerily quiet facility once acted as a prison in the days of the Foreigners. It served as one of 14 large detainment facilities, placed high up at the peak of a constantly rotating spire in an icy tundra. However, the blistering cold had managed to work its way inside this prison, an act only made possible by a jailbreak of the largest proportion. Whatever large, devilish person or creature that was once detained here by the Foreigners had somehow managed to use its terrifying power to brute force its way out of this highly secure location. What could possibly do such a thing while making such a large exit hole and being able to survive the icy blizzard? What were the Foreigners keeping here? And where is it now? The spire, notorious for invasion, is in fact one of the many spires used by the Covenant during large-scale invasions. These towers act sort of like forward operating bases, allowing large groups of units to teleport into the battle from a carrier ship, and projecting a strong, EMP-capable defensive shield to protect those within. As George and Noble 6 learned the hard way, the only way to destroy one of these suckers is to get inside and deactivate the shield from the inside. Not even a Mac round can penetrate it, so the Covenant really knew what they were doing when they made these. Another one of Oni's many facilities on Reach, Sword Base was the tip of the iceberg of secrets hidden beneath the surface of the ice shelf it was built upon. Prior to its initial invasion by the Covenant, this grand, majestic building was the hidey hole of many Oni spooks. Very in fitting with their elitist governmental attitudes, the lobby was adorned with two pieces of Covenant technology, recovered during Operation Guardian Lance, a UNSC mission that took place on Jericho 7 12 years prior to the fall of Reach. Despite Noble Team's successful defense of the facility against the initial Covenant invasion, the Covenant were tunnel-visioned on this base for reasons only made clear to Noble in the final hour, and they eventually mounted a second invasion force, one that would this time achieve victory in a very convincing, demoralizing fashion. Tempest is quite possibly the most mysterious map in Reach. Set on an unknown Halo installation, this facility acted as part of the Halo's weather control system. Its architecture is fairly familiar, with the towers in the distance kind of resembling those in the lake near the library on Delta Halo, and with the all too iconic beam towers taking center stage on the island, except these towers seem to function slightly differently than usual. They emit one long continuous beam of energy that occasionally charges up and reflects into the sky. This is more than likely to do with its involvement in weather manipulation, the Foreigner's version of HARP. However, what makes this map even more strange is that a UNSC longsword has crashed on the beach and its crew, wherever they are now, survived. The chatter between the two survivors can be heard over the somehow still intact radio, where they both converse about not only their confusion sparked by this mysterious facility in Ringworld, but also their hope that Oni can decipher the facility's use case and that they don't drive the Halo back to Earth. Very strange. Oh, and something that I had no idea about until I researched this map for this video, this map was originally going to be a Halo 3 DLC map, but clearly it wasn't, it was cut and saved for Reach. The more you know. Set inside the communication centre of the infamous Ardent Prayer corvette that Noble Six and George yeeted into another dimension, Zealot bears a subtle resemblance to Midship, set on board the CCS battlecruiser, the Pious Inquisitor. This area of the ship demonstrates perfectly the elegant beauty and simplicity of Covenant architecture, yet despite its sleek and stylish design, many human lives were likely brought to an end in this very room. And so, that's it, at least for the multiplayer maps. You see, here on Hidden Xperia, we don't do things in half measures, we go the full mile. So let's round off the video with the lore behind all of the Firefight maps as well. Starting off with Beachhead, this once idyllic, scenic beachside park became a war zone during the Covenant's invasion of New Alexandria. Caracalla Park, as it was once called, became the home of multiple M95 Lance missile batteries, defending evacuation ships from Covenant air forces as they attempted to ferry civilians to safety. Corvette is simply the hangar of the Covenant corvette Ardent Prayer. As we already mentioned, the Ardent Prayer, along with the Long Night of Solace, were yeeted into oblivion, but not before Noble Six sent hundreds upon hundreds of poor little grunts into the abyss. Courtyard takes place in the entry courtyard of Oni's sword base. With all the entry points sealed shut, the Covenant's only way in is via dropships, and with all the local AA guns now offline, Noble Six is the only thing stopping this invasion force from unlocking the secrets hidden beneath the surface. And these secrets that the Covenant are after are located within the massive Foreigner ship in Glacier. Glacier is set in front of Dr. Halsey's lab, where her and Cortana were investigating this ship, and also where Noble Team held off the Covenant long enough to get Halsey and the AI out, and to also sink the ship and any unlucky Covenant still in the cavern to an icy grave. Located on one of the Azad shipbreaking yard's landing platforms, Holdout acts as an observation point for multiple graveyards, both ship-based and Mjolnir-based. In the background, the formidable Pillar of Autumn is docked, even though it technically shouldn't be, before its final departure from Reach. As the name and incredibly familiar map design implies, Installation 04 is based on one of the beam towers by the cliffside on Installation 04. Similar to the original incarnation of the area, some ODSTs have taken refuge in the tower and are ready to defend it with you. The underground tunnel section, however, is now shut off, and a familiar light bulb can be seen floating behind the glass. I wonder, why did he close the doors, and what could he be hiding down there? Set on the long road to Sword Base, Outpost is situated in a Covenant anti-aircraft emplacement. The two massive Tyrant AA cannons remain inactive, but the surrounding area, once a vista of cold white ice, is now a much more ominous glow of orange, with the Covenant's glassing of the area melting part of the ice shelf. If there was ever a map to symbolize humanity's defeat, this would be it. With Outpost resembling the end of humanity's war on Reach, Overlook resembles the beginning. Set in one of the many Kiva farms in Visegrad, this small, once quiet homestead became the site of Noble Team's first encounter with the Covenant on Reach. It does make me wonder though, when the Covenant came here for the first time, did they ever think about bringing choppers to help plough the fields? No? Just me wondering that? Okay. Set in a rather unique location, Unearthed is the site of one of BXR Mining Corporation's titanium mines in the Vieri region of Reach. In the distance, large shards of the precious metal can be seen protruding out of the ground, and the facility itself sports an incredibly industrial look, rather reminiscent of modern-day mines in fact. Perhaps the Covenant chose to invade here not due to it holding any logistical or tactical advantage, but rather to get an insight into our history. And finally, we have a rather simple yet humble area that was originally used for nefarious purposes: Waterfront. Located on the other side of the gorge to Powerhouse, Waterfront is a pumping station that was later used as part of a contraband smuggling route by insurrectionists and locals. Now, these rebels and their former enemies join forces to take on a power that threatens them both. Military officials will, for once, actually be thankful for the Inni's bountiful stockpile of weaponry and ammunition. On the very edge of human-occupied space lies Erebus 7, home to Abandon, an eerie, foreboding forest, at the heart of which lies a desolate Oni research outpost. Something about Erebus 7 appears to fascinate the Office, who have established multiple research facilities on the planet. Perhaps this has something to do with its human-friendly atmosphere, or its extremely hostile indigenous wildlife, or the ancient secrets hidden within its dense forests. But it's clear that its natural inhabitants think otherwise. In 2557, Oni mysteriously lost contact with all of its research teams on the planet, and the remote contact teams who were sent in to investigate found nothing but quiet, dead laboratories, their curators gone without a trace, leaving nothing but their strange specimens, creatures, likely ancient, their ancestors, the puppets of parasites. Something about this mass disappearance really spooked the Office. Immediately following the sitrep from the contact teams on the ground, Oni higher-ups suspended all research on Erebus 7, and appear worryingly hesitant to return. Whatever lurks in these dark forests is not to be trifled with, no matter the prize for doing so. Adrift above a gas giant being pulled towards a certain doom is the CAA Heavy Burden, an ex-mining vessel that was refitted as an ordnance transport ship. Sadly though, during the Battle of Colo, the ship sustained significant damage, likely to its navigation and propulsion systems, and as a consequence, it is slowly being sucked into the gravity well of the gas giant beneath, where it will eventually meet a fiery death. However, despite its death clock ticking faster by the minute, its automated onboard systems continue to operate undisturbed, executing their operations in an eerie act of ignorance, unaware that it's only a matter of time until they cease to exist. The perfect example of this is the robotic systems at the centre of the map that are still proudly constructing the runting Yggdrasil Mark II-D Mega Mantis atop a podium, all the while rapidly plummeting to a certain doom. Complex, or as it's known by all in the UNSC, Galileo Base, was a UNSC research facility on the northeastern coastline of Requiem's largest continent that was built around a foreigner artifact that scientists were excavating. Because of both the sensitive nature of their operation and also the several hostile factions vying for control of Requiem, Oni enforced a persistent field resilience mandate on all of those stationed there. This mandate required scientists to maintain on-site weapon caches, optimize site layout to meet Oni spec for defensive emergencies, and retain an escort of well-trained military personnel should the base fall under attack. The worries Oni had that led to them enforcing this mandate were well-founded, however. In February of 2558, the base came under attack from Julam Dharma's forces, who were after an artifact known as the Didact's Gift that the UNSC had retrieved and was storing at the base. Fireteams Crimson and Majestic managed to successfully defend the base, however, preventing both a nuclear reactor meltdown and also extracting the artifact in the process, denying the enemy their prize. Erosion is the first Forge canvas that we'll cover today. It's based on a moon, referred to as Eudemon X49-05, that was discovered by human pioneer groups following the Human Covenant War. During the war, humanity lost a significant number of its colonies, and so, in the years following, the UNSC dispatched advanced pioneer groups to survey potential new inhabitable worlds, one of which, luckily, stumbled across Eudemon. However, many concerns remain regarding the moon's structural integrity. If erosion is one of many swampy cave systems lying just beneath the surface of this rock, it may not be the safest moon to try and colonize. Exile is a site where a valiant few turned certain doom into prosperity. During the Human Covenant War, the UNSC Diadochi, an ammunition ship commissioned by the UNSC Navy, violently crash-landed on a previously undiscovered planet just outside of one of the UEG's interplanetary trade routes. Those lucky few who survived the crash managed to salvage provisions from the wreckage and turn it into a makeshift shelter in which they lived for years. By the time rescue and recovery teams finally arrived, the marooned crew had created a bustling, healthy community, thriving in the ruins of their ship. Following their rediscovery, the planet they crashed on was named Partition, in reference to the inspiration the Navy took from ancient Greek history when naming their ammunition ship. High up in the skies of Requiem sits Haven, one of many harmonic resonance platforms that once hovered among the clouds of the Shield World. These facilities played crucial roles in the maintenance of the world, facilitating the monitoring and management of its solar preservation system, which, in layman's terms, means that it was responsible for one of the miniature artificial stars that illuminated the interior of the Shield World, baking it in false sunlight. It goes without saying how crucial sunlight was in maintaining the natural life that inhabited the interior of this world, and without the Haven facility and the other elaborate facilities like it, Requiem's surface would have been a dark, dead place. However, the Haven facility in particular may also have a more important yet still unknown purpose. When the Master Chief interacted with the Librarian's imprint when she accelerated his evolution, she did so on the edge of the Haven facility. Now, whether this facility in particular harnessed some ancient power that the others did not is unknown, but it definitely bears theorizing. Impact, the second Forge canvas, is in fact an only archaeological site on a remote asteroid, drifting through unknown space. Their reason for setting up shop on such a seemingly mundane rock is quite possibly cataclysmic in its importance. In 2547, one of their patrol drones recorded a particularly violent meteor collision, and the research site was quickly set up to investigate. Upon inspection, researchers were baffled to discover that, in fact, there was something inside the meteor that somehow survived the impact, an object of unknown origin. However, their most significant discovery was yet to come. Upon further investigation, the researchers made a significant discovery. The object, the artifact, predates even the earliest of Forerunner artifacts. Those few with the clearance to know of such truths now speculate that this artifact may be ancient human, or even precursor in nature. Both are incredible prospects, but if the latter is the case, this strange artifact could change the course of human history. In the northern polar region of the planet Concord is the Longbow Station, an abandoned mass driver facility perched on one of the pole's Arctic shores. The frigid climate combined with Concord's unique gravitational conditions made this the optimal location to build a station intended for launching relay scanners into deep space. Prior to the Covenant War, the United Earth government primarily used this facility to launch these deep space monitoring relays in an effort to study far-flung star systems, not yet explored by humanity. However, when the planet fell under Covenant assault in 2551, the station was likely abandoned, its inhabitants either fleeing to the safety of the inner colonies or perishing in this Arctic tundra. Most Forerunner constructs are known to stand the test of time like nothing else, the passing of 1,000,000 years barely aging them a second. However, the aptly named Meltdown facility is one of the few exceptions. Built on a mysterious Forerunner moon, this large facility once powered the Forerunner war effort against the ancient parasite, but in the years following the firing of the array, has fallen into disrepair. Dangerous disrepair. The failure of the maintenance systems that sparked the collapse of this facility have also begun to melt the ice on which it was built. These freezing temperatures were once harnessed to control the reactor's intense heat, but it's clear the meltdown of this facility has broken the frigid control the ice once had over it, and in some time, what was once an icy tundra will likely morph into a blistering lake. This curious gorge, known to some as Two Giants and to others as Ragnarok, was a site of much interest to the UNSC on Requiem. The two giant beam towers on either end of the gorge are not unique to this gorge, nor this installation in fact. Although their purpose is still mostly unknown, very similar towers have been spotted on various Halo installations, Shield worlds, and also the Ark, where they're commonly located in gorges such as this, so they can utilise the environment's natural harmonics to amplify their signals, fired into deep space. According to the mysterious Forerunner AI system, Catalogue, the template for this valley was reused on multiple installations to the specific requirements of its pattern weaver, or creator, or at the behest of random variables of the template. During the UNSC Infinity's Requiem campaign, the Ragnarok Gorge was the site of a conflict between Fireteam Crimson and Julum Dharma's forces. A UNSC science team, Mountain Squad, had been deployed to the valley to investigate a signal picked up by Galileo Base. However, they were shot down on their approach and marooned in the valley. Not the first time a gorge like this has experienced a crash landing. Fireteam Crimson were sent in on a rescue op, however all the scientists were sadly killed before they could be evacuated, leaving Crimson to investigate these strange communication relay towers themselves. Ravine is the third canvas map in Halo 4, and one that possibly hides an immense secret beneath its quaint surface. During the Requiem campaign, ONI dispatched a group of research teams on a number of highly classified expeditions to this part of the Shield world, to try and understand the purpose of these massive towers. However, following a series of deep sensor seismic scans, they discovered that these structures were far more than just towers. They were in fact the tips of infinitely larger constructs hidden beneath the ocean. Current theories posit that these spires are rampart-like towers, acting like automated battlements of gargantuan Forerunner castles, swallowed by the ocean and the passing of eons. If so, it's almost impossible to visualise the raw scale of the castles that these ramparts were designed to defend, and horrifying to imagine what the Forerunners were defending this castle from that required such vast and awe-inspiring defences. Solace is a map named very ironically. It's set in a Forerunner stellar engineering facility on the edge of an oceanside cliff face on an unknown Forerunner world. These facilities played crucial roles in the maintenance of Forerunner regions of space and were run by Forerunner stellar engineers, referred to by some as plasma jockeys, who were burdened with the vital role of preventing the death of certain stars, an example of which can be seen above the Solace facility. The jockeys use these facilities to prevent stars in their systems from going supernova, a task that was not only incredibly difficult, but also incredibly perilous. The vast amount of energy involved in sustaining a dying star made this process almost impossible to pull off. It was rarely entertained, only in the most dire of circumstances, and even more rarely was it executed successfully. Vortex is, based on theorization by ONI personnel, a vast ancient structure that harnessed Requiem's torrential winds for power. A technology that, if harnessed, could revolutionize human power production. During the Requiem campaign, the Cyclone facility, as it was referred to by the UNSC, was the site of much conflict. Initially, it was used as a Covenant supply store before being destroyed by Fireteam Crimson. However, it was later retaken and became home to multiple plasma artilleries. Fireteam Crimson and Kodiak were once again dispatched to the area and successfully cleared the Cyclone of all enemy presence. However, following the abduction of Dr. Halsey from the Infinity, Crimson once again returned to Vortex, following reports that Halsey had been using it to bounce her transmissions. The area had been, once again, taken over by the Covenant. But after further fighting, Crimson once again regained control of it. Harvest, the first of Halo 4's 12 DLC maps, is set in the Tiara Space Tether Complex on the planet Harvest, home to the Tiara space elevators that played a vital role in the Covenant's initial invasion of the planet. Given that Harvest was an agricultural world, this space elevator complex, and others like it, were key in exporting the grain harvested here throughout the colonies. However, when the Covenant arrived, these facilities would be repurposed in a rather sinister way. What was once used to provide sustenance and life to billions among the stars became a conduit for transporting alien troops and supplies onto the planet, allowing the Covenant to achieve their first major victory over humanity in what would be a long and bloody war. Located on Muroto, one of the moons of the planet Kaiseti 4, the orbit of which was the site of one of the first major battles in the Covenant War, Shatter is a facility created by Materials Group, the division of the UNSC responsible for the creation of Mjolnir. This grim, dark, and rather moody place was once a mining facility, no doubt where Materials Group would harvest rock and metals to later be used in highly experimental military hardware. However, excessive volcanic activity on Muroto seems to have concluded their mining operation. An operation that, if the surroundings are anything to go by, had been underway for quite some time. As the name implies, wreckage is the site of multiple large vessel crash sites. The carcasses of both a UNSC Paris-class frigate and a Covenant Lich lie on this cliff face. However, what brought these vessels down was more than likely not a naval conflict. Rather, it's more than likely that the large spires off in the ocean had something to do with it. It seems these vessels stumbled across the ancient Maginot Line, of which this planet is part of. The Maginot Line was a large defensive front set up by the Foreigners to defend their core worlds from the Flood. It was, and still appears to be, made up of numerous line installations that utilise a number of defensive measures to prevent any foreign vessel from passing. These two ships crash-landed on line installation 9 through 12, and were the unfortunate victims of an ancient defense mechanism designed as a last-ditch barrier of protection against the parasite. However, by the time the Foreigners had to fall back on these installations, they knew the parasite had already won. Too much of the galaxy had already been consumed for these defences, as effective as they may be, to prevent the inevitable. Although it is interesting to note that they still protect the Orion Arm to this date. Perhaps they'll prove useful in the wars to come, or, God forbid, when the parasite chooses to make its grand return. Landfall is a shipping port in Casba City on the planet of Tribute. Prior to the Covenant War, Tribute was a hotbed of insurrectionist activity, with a number of anti-insurrection operations being conducted in its cities. Terrorist activity aside, it was also a beacon of commerce in the inner colonies, with the shipping port of Landfall being one of likely thousands scattered across the planet that dealt with imports and exports and off-world transportation of any and all kinds. However, as seen off in the distance, Landfall is set during Casba City's aggressive invasion by the Covenant in 2552. Evacuation of the city was conducted through the port, as evidenced by the civilian transport craft docked nearby, frantically running civilians off-planet, likely to the safety of a nearby transport ship, before returning to pick up more. The few survivors of this event tell a heroic tale of a team of Spartans who put everything on the line to defend Casba Station long enough for civilians to evacuate. Although these Spartans ultimately fell in battle, they were successful in defending the port, and those who survived because of them will never forget their sacrifice. Orbiting the ancient human world of Sothra Hakor is Monolith, an ancient monument built to honour the warrior servants who fell in battle with the ancient humans, a bloody, hard-fought victory for the Foreigner Empire. The monolith itself is built upon an asteroid, one of many in the belt that surrounds Sothra Hakor. In the centre of the site is a strange hologram, vibrant and rather alive, likely communicating information and transmitting data to installations beyond our comprehension across the galaxy. Or perhaps this hologram is something of a cenotaph, a beautiful and incredibly Foreigner display of respect for their fallen warriors. Skyline is a map with a literal name. Visible from the balcony of this high-rise platform is the skyline of the city of Mindoro, on the planet of Cascade. The site itself is the under-construction 512th floor of the Nova Austin Station, a new space elevator under construction by Lethbridge Industrial, part of which is visible once again from the balcony. This floor specifically is located in Area A06 of the station, which clearly is an enormous tether, likely to be used for all manners of transportation: commercial, industrial, and military. Construction of this elevator in particular began in 2553, following the end of the war, likely due to the post-war boom that Cascade saw as life returned to some degree of normalcy, albeit temporary normalcy. Although its construction is not yet complete, departure boards seem to show outgoing trips from Mindoro to Casper City on Tribute, to Elysium City on Eridanus 2, and to New Albany on Draco 3. However, perhaps this station has had run-ins with fugitives and criminals in the past. I mean, why else would there be an AV-14 Hornet patrolling above with its searchlight shining bright? Located within the Savaron Highlands of the planet Obarn is Daybreak, a map named after a United Earth government operation that takes place in the area. This highland region is home to a number of ONI bases and sensor relays, which is where the United Earth government's Operation Daybreak is based. However, we know nothing of the details or goals of this operation. Floating above this otherwise rather plain valley is the UNSC Aegis Fate, a Strident-class heavy frigate. Perhaps its presence is linked to Operation Daybreak, or maybe it has something to do with the UNSC Navy's tendency to use this area as a staging ground for classified military campaigns in neighbouring star systems. Outcast takes place in one of the many insurrectionist outposts scattered across the galaxy. This one situated in the caverns of Talitsa, a known hotbed of insurrectionist activity. Winding throughout this desert canyon is a dusty, heavily worn road, besides which are a plethora of insurrectionist strictures, likely storing weapons, equipment, rations, and the like, along with guerrilla-style tunnels carved into the rock for ease of access. Occasionally, a freighter ship docks on one of the landing pads, probably ferrying supplies between similar bases scattered throughout the desert, on the horizon of which is Vitali Evna, a massive, ringed gas giant, the colours of which blend in, almost intentionally, with the browns and beiges of the desert rocks and sand. Perdition is located within arguably one of the most dangerous things in galactic existence, a thermonuclear reactor undergoing a catastrophic meltdown. The facility itself is the Pilvros Municipal Support Facility on New Carthage, a facility that contains both the nuclear power plant and also a water treatment plant. Given the monorail service, which is still for some reason active, that passes through the facility, it's clear that this plant was once a significant employer of workers who lived in its city and the neighbouring regions. However, its meltdown was so catastrophic that the entire city had to be evacuated, and so everything in the plant is exactly where and as it was left by those who fled when the warning sirens first sounded. Before the reactor went fully critical, a team of scientists was sent into the site to create environment scans for later study, to try and help nuclear workers understand what went wrong and, more importantly, how they can prevent such a nuclear outcome in the future. Unfortunately though, the inhabitants of the city will likely never be able to return to their former homes following this disaster. If Chernobyl is to remain uninhabitable for the next 20,000 years thanks to its meltdown, it doesn't bear thinking how long it'll take for an area affected by a meltdown this bad to recover. Perhaps by the time it does recover, the infamous 21st century video game Ringworld Limitless will finally be on store shelves throughout the colonies. One can but dream. The fourth and final canvas arena in Halo 4 is Forge Island, referred to as the Great Anvils by the Infinity Science team, who saw these islands as some of the most remarkable features of Requiem. Little is known of these oddly flat rock formations besides that they resided in a peninsula southwest of Requiem's smallest continent. Perhaps, like the spires found in Ravine, they're just the tip of the iceberg and much larger rock formations exist beneath the water, but we'll never know for sure. Despite UNSC training instructors' love of the pit, favouring it over other training arenas thanks to it being a physical arena as opposed to a virtual arena, the Pitfall facility, identical in almost every way to the pit, was remade for wargame simulations. Pitfall is set in the now abandoned UNSC Thorenberg Combat Training Facility, possibly one of many like the pit to share this layout and design. Whether this is due to its proven effectiveness at training soldiers is unknown, but regardless of how beloved and effective this arena layout may be, it was for some reason abandoned and left to be consumed by the sands of time, a decaying, lost imitation of its now superior brother. Why it was abandoned is unknown. Perhaps it was the Covenant, perhaps it was budget cuts, or perhaps real-world training really is surplus to requirement in the era of VR training. And so, here we are at the final map of today, Vertigo, a UNSC weather research site on a rocky beach on the colony world of Tessera. Given Tessera's extreme volatile weather and gigantic oceans, it was the perfect place for the UNSC to establish an array of isolated facilities intended for weather research and, possibly, weather manipulation. I mean, why else would a military body be researching the weather? However, much like the weather it was set up to investigate, the facility is rather unstable and has several exposed areas that, if impacted, release a large EMP blast. Whether this is an unintentional flaw of the design of these structures, or a way that the researchers at these stations managed to harness the violent maelstrom off in the distance, is unknown, but if it's the latter, the UNSC may have a devastating new form of weaponry on their hands.